Pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, thank you very much. I would entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
I'll make a motion to approve the agenda.
Motion by Councilmember Monroe.
Second.
Seconded by Councilmember Henry.
Whoa.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Do we have any residents that would like to comment or question anything that is not on the agenda this evening? Come on up, introduce yourself, where you live and your name, and I guess that's introducing yourself. Yep.
Sure.
Just go ahead and speak into the microphone so that everybody has the pleasure of hearing you and what you have to say. Carver Black Sox.
Mm-hmm. Got a good deal on the hat.
Nice.
So my name is Brian Larkham. I live on 314 Sibley Street in Carver, and just thought I'd check out the city council meeting. But something I just noticed with the garbage service, maybe it's been brought up before, if there would be a chance going down to maybe 1 or 2 garbage services, because you're at, I think, 4. There's a lot of trucks going back and forth through the streets. And, I walk the dog every day, and I see the streets kind of breaking up, and it's just... Mm-hmm. I'm sure it's been brought up before, but that's just something I'd mentioned.
Sure. Mr. Mareck? How many services do we have?
The city licenses 3 sanitation haulers right now, so residents have their choice of those 3. There are cities that do single hauler. There's pros and cons to that. The city of Bloomington just went through an extended process with that.
It didn't go well.
So it's ultimately a policy decision for the council to undertake.
Cool. Are you saying that you'd like to see fewer choices?
Oh yeah, we have waste management. There's only probably 3 residents on the street that have the truck, that comes past, and then there's Elite, I think, used to, and then there's an organic one.
I think organic got bought out by
SWS.
Waste Management, Suburban Waste, and Republic are the 3 current haulers.
So I'm not necessarily complaining, but it was just an idea, because to get to the end of the street, they got to come past. They come past again, and then that Thursday, and then Friday they come too. So
sure.
I just see what it's doing to the streets. And granted, it's not all the trucks that are damaging the streets; it's just age, I suppose. But I did see where they seal coated last year, and they sealed the cracks. And around the manholes, it's pretty evident that things are breaking up again, right on the right-hand turns they make out, so.
Brent, when is the license process, and when we bid grant licenses? We just did it, didn't we?
Yeah, so sanitation licenses are good for 1 year.
Yep.
They fill out an application. The application has...
Well, it just came before the council, though, about 3 months
it's related to insurance. They have to list their equipment. There isn't a... what I'd call a detailed or arduous process to...
I understand that, but my point being is that we can follow that process. We've granted licenses for a year. That will come up again when we grant licenses, and we can talk about that at that point. We can't take licenses away at this point.
I don't know the answer to that. I defer to the city attorney.
No. Well, I wouldn't want to. I mean, everybody's got it all set up. And then in the following procedure is if we can get your name and number, we'll get back to you with when the licenses come up for renewal, and then we can have that discussion again.
Yeah, it's nothing real important, but just a suggestion. I know it's when I go to Shakopee, I think they have their own garbage service, right? And it sounds like some towns have gone to their own garbage service or a single garbage service. It sounds like that didn't work out so well, according to what you're saying.
Yeah,
St. Paul's having some big time problems.
We have a place in St. Paul, and it's an absolute nightmare.
Okay.
But we will be talking about it again.
All right.
Appreciate
Thanks
it.
for the feedback.
Yep. Anyone else? Resident comments and questions? That was nice. That's the first one we've had in a really long time, so thank you for that. It's quite exciting here at the Carver City Council meeting. Yeah, nice. All right, then we have no presentations, reports, or public hearings. I'd entertain a motion on the consent agenda.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
I'd like to recognize Councilmember Mock as making the motion,
Okay, I'll second it.
seconded by Councilmember Monroe. There's a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. We are to unfinished business, which we have none. Mr. Mareck, Certified Levy Study, 9.1.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. I'll get into a little bit of a history piece before I introduce Todd Hubner with WSB on a certified levy proposal. For several years, if not decades, the city has been sending letters to the United States Army Corps of Engineers to get on a list to do
It's been decades.
to do a study. In about 2015 or 2016, the city of Carver moved up on the priority list, and for about a year, city staff engaged with the Army Corps of Engineers to look at a feasibility study through several work sessions and meetings, actually in St. Paul. The council ultimately decided not to move forward with the Army Corps of Engineers just based on process, price, unknowns. I defer to the council if you wanted to add any more reasons to that. That's my recollection of the process. The council ultimately decided to go with Mead and Hunt, a private engineering firm, to do a kind of a data gathering report on a feasibility study, so to collect all the information that was available regarding our levy, past flood issues, maintenance procedures taken on by public services. And so in June of 2017, the council authorized that and spent $38,720. Then the next step with that was ultimately going to be a phase 2 process. Initially, the city was told that it would cost approximately $150,000 compared to a $280,000 estimate from the Army Corps of Engineers. However, throughout different conversations and processes, that proposal, which is currently in your packet, has risen to $324,100. And so based on several conversations and some maybe uncertainty with process, city staff reached out to WSB to look at a potential alternative or a secondary path to accomplishing a certified levy in the city of Carver. And so at your last work session, Todd Hubner and Brian Barassa with WSB presented a proposal.
Brian who?
Barassa.
I know, Brian.
That essentially looked at the feasibility study in a different way, and primarily it looked at developing a concept that would be developed to the point where the city could seek additional funding to develop the engineering of it, where Mead and Hunt's proposal is primarily focused on developing the engineering and then seeking the funding on a secondary basis. And so there was an interest from the council enough to invite Todd and WSB back to the regular meeting to present not only for the council again, but for those maybe watching on TV or in the audience tonight about their process to go through the certified levy proposal and understanding how that relates to the impacts to the downtown and how people can understand the process. So with that, I'll turn it over to Todd with WSB.
Thank you, Honorable Mayor, City Council, City Manager, and staff. I think we have this up here.
Welcome back.
Thank you. It's good to be here tonight. Pushing the
Button on the right.
Is your engineering better?
I did not man the AV cart at my high school. I was left that to others more capable than me. So tonight we're here to talk about the levy certification for the Carver levy. And we really have, to date, the city of Carver has done a lot of background information on your existing levy. The red lines up there are your existing levy limits. So there's been some data collection that's been going on that was completed. You have some ongoing maintenance needs and activities that the city staff has been undertaking. And there's also been some current road construction downtown. So there's a number of things that have been going on around the levy at this time. And I think the desire is to allow for that levy to be certified, which lifts some of the moratoriums on investment in properties so that folks can put more than 50% of the value into these properties and preserve them for their ongoing uses, and also to increase the level of flood protection to the city of Carver downtown. We really propose 4 different buckets or approaches, distinct phases with this project. The first one is really a concept plan and funding strategy. And the second one is the design and permitting portion of it. And then we would go to construction and then the certification process, which is really a checklist and paperwork process with the federal government. And you can see that the timeline to complete all of these, we see the first concept is about 6 to 18 months, the second bucket is 6 to 15 months, and that third bucket of construction is about 12 to 14 months, and levy certification is between 2 and 4 years. So from the beginning to the end, we're looking at just about somewhere between 4 and 6 years of work to get the levy certified. In the first task, which is really developing a concept plan, I believe the city has done enough background work so that a concept can be developed that would really look at defining what the project would be, putting together some preliminary cost estimates, developing some cost-benefit analysis for some of our grant and funding partners, and then putting together a funding strategy that would allow the city of Carver to approach the various agencies that would be involved in funding or potentially funding, including the legislature, some of the DNR folks, and other grants that may be available to the city of Carver. The second is the design and permitting. We would really like to start this once the grants have been awarded or bonding or some other mechanism has been awarded to the city of Carver. These activities are all grant eligible under the previous grants that we have worked with. And as part of that, we would do this design in a technical advisory panel way. So we have some of the folks that would permit this levy as part of the design process. I think that's important to have the Army Corps of Engineers on board and members of the Minnesota Department of Natural Resources, because they will have a say in how that certification document at the very end of the project is received by FEMA and others as they go through that process, and also will help us with the grant administration process. We want to make sure that everything is done with the I's dotted and the T's crossed, so there are no surprises at the end, because those become expensive at the end of the process if we don't know about them at the beginning, and also accelerates the permitting process. And the third part is always everybody's fun part. It's construction. We spend a lot of time at the beginning, and we get to construction, and that's when we get to see the improvements actually become reality. And as through that process, there would be a bid letting, administration of the grants, making sure that the projects that are on the ground that are being undertaken meet the requirements of FEMA, and to ensure that the Army Corps of Engineers as well requirements are met and all the permit obligations are fulfilled. And then closing out that project is just as important as beginning that project, to make sure that all the project is closed out in a timely fashion so that all of the grant monies can be received. Then the fourth phase is the certification process. It's really a checklist process. You go through and make sure that all the documents that you've prepared through your design and permitting are all assembled, that you've done record plan drawings of all the elements of the levy in accordance with federal requirements, and you put that together in a nice package and you ship it off to FEMA. And depending on how busy FEMA is, it can take anywhere from 2 to 4 years, and also how good your application is. So there are some that have taken longer than that time period, but I think the level of effort for the city of Carver, we should be well under that 4-year time period once we get to this process. Just a case study that I'd like to just highlight for you is the city of Afton. We're currently in the levy certification phase. We're about ready to submit that certification document here in the near future. In the visioning process, this process started about 8 years ago. As we began that process with the city of Afton, their first initial issue was their levy. Their levy was not meeting the volunteer program requirements for the United States Army Corps of Engineers. They were looking to upgrade the levee, and as we got into that, we noticed that the county road was in bad shape. They have no public utilities and tiny lots downtown, so there's no sanitary or water or anything. So we had some environmental issues to deal with. We had some contaminated well water. We also had a number of historical significant structures, very similar to the city of Carver. And we began a process to vision the downtown. And what I would the reason I bring up that visioning process, and I know the city of Carver has completed much of that through the process, is that you want to make sure you take advantage of every opportunity you have to shape the downtown area the way you would like it. This is a very significant investment for the city. Sometimes you can use the same dollar to accomplish more than one task. In this situation, we were able to get a community sewage system in, a collection system, new county roads, new local roads, and we were able to find $4 from outside the city of Afton for every dollar the city of Afton put in. So it's a $20 million project, and the city of Afton put in $4 million. During the preliminary design, that's when we noticed that all the downtown roads needed to be redeveloped, and so the city did use their road reconstruction fund to match and to leverage those federal and state dollars. And also the county came together with their county road improvements, and then also cost participated in much of the storm sewer construction as well, including diverting some stormwater around the levee area so that we no longer had to pump that over the top of the levee. So then construction, that was a 2-year process. 90% of it got completed in 2017. We just completed that flood pass-through in 2018. Kind of a significant improvement for the city of Afton is that process right there. They now have access to their city docks without having to walk over the top of the levee to get to the river, and it provided ADA compliance in accordance with federal rules for the pedestrian passage from the city docks to the downtown village of Afton. So as I mentioned, we're currently in the process of the levee certification. We've done a preliminary walkthrough with our staff. We will be walking it one more time here with the Army Corps of Engineers and finishing up the restoration. And then we will be filling out our paperwork and submitting it in the very near term for certification. So I think that's a really good background on how the process might go. And I think the upfront visioning piece is going to move very rapidly in Carver. I think you've done most of the groundwork that's necessary to do so. In meeting with your staff, they have a clear vision, I believe, of what this levee should look like and what we can do for a concept plan and get cost estimates underway. And with that, I would entertain any questions.
All right. I have a few, but in the meantime, does anyone else have any questions, comments?
I have a question. Concerning the certification, we go through the first 3 buckets and everything's hunky-dory, going great. We get the project done. Is there any reason that it would not be certified?
I can't imagine there would be any reason it wouldn't be certified.
You've never had that experience?
Well, no, I have not. And I think that if you're beginning your process with that end in mind, you're better off. I know of folks that have done levee improvements and then at a later date decided they wanted to try for certification, and that has taken an extended period of time to do so because they did not start their improvements up front with the certification as their goal in the end. And that has happened.
They started improvements, but they didn't do it with certification in mind. They just did some improvements and then went, whoa, hey, we should certify this?
Yes, and
Okay,
because and there's 2 different processes. There's an Army Corps voluntary program, and that has different standards than FEMA does for certification. And it's really the FEMA certification requirements that dictate how much you can, what you can do in the floodplain areas. The flood insurance pieces from FEMA, the limitations on expenditures for improvements are limitations by FEMA, whereas the Corps voluntary program is really just a cost share to repair your levee after damage has happened.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Okay, so I have a couple of questions. Sorry, did you have? Okay. Could you go back to the slide with the project next steps and kind of the buckets? So I'm going to give you an analogy. I've been doing this. This is my 20th year. This is probably my 300th or 400th conversation on this levee. So I'm like the 87-year-old guy that's just getting a cell phone for the first time. Everybody's telling me that the cell phone is great, but I don't trust it because I've had enough experience with the rotary phone. It's a really bad analogy, but I want to trust you. So what I would like you to tell me is when we're going through this, we have the concept plan. You're the first person to come in here and tell us that you can actually get it certified. No one's told us that before. You're also the first that has done it. So I have a little bit of faith in that. So I'm actually buying into this. Let me ask you this in terms of Afton's process. You're using that as a case study. With these buckets in mind, did they use the same buckets? Did you sell them on these buckets the same way you're selling us?
No, that came about through a different process, because initially, like I said, the levy was what we were looking at, just to get it in compliance with the core at the time. And that's when we looked at the visioning process, and we said, let's just take a step back. We know the county in that particular case had tried to reconstruct the Old Village County Road 2 years or twice previously over the past 15 years. We knew that several of the residents wanted to do improvements and businesses, and they were starting to lose businesses in the Old Village because they no longer could invest to bring it up to current codes and standards because it was more than 50% of the value of their properties. And we also started to have water quality issues in the drinking water wells because their wells were literally underneath their septic drain fields in a very sandy location. And all those things started to add up, and we said, why don't we look at this, get the community together, and we spent 2 years just talking about what the Old Village should become. And through that process, we decided that the village decided, and the elected officials, that we should go for levy certification. They had never had a certified levy before. They had concerns that they weren't be able to sustain the properties in their Old Village much longer and property values without a certified levy. The county stepped forward and said, we'll be a partner in this.
At Washington County?
Yeah, Washington County, yep. And then we approached the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency and went through the Public Facilities Authority and received almost $7 million in grants between sanitary and stormwater. And then we also approached the Minnesota Department of Natural Resources, going through our legislative process. And to date, they've allocated almost $3.6 million, and we have $4.5 million from Washington County and $500,000 from the local watershed district, and some money that we pulled together from the Board of Water and Soil Resources as well. So almost $16 million came in from outside the city. As we started seeing that all come together, that was not how we started, right? So that process then developed into that vision, and then we stepped into the design and the permitting. So in a way, we did use this process. It wasn't intentional, though.
Okay, these buckets kind of came out basically out of the Afton process.
Correct.
Okay. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just have a couple other questions.
Well, I still have questions.
Okay.
No, go ahead. If they're bucket questions.
It is bucket questions.
Okay. Because I have specific questions on the buckets, so go ahead. You have bucket questions. Go ahead.
Actually, my first question is this, about the money bucket.
Okay,
Let's talk about the money
where I'm
bucket.
at.
You said that 4 out of every $5 was a grant or some sort of funding that was not city funding.
Correct.
What portion of the levy itself was grant funded?
So they had
in fact, how much was the levy portion of this project?
the levy.
This is a big project because you're doing, roads and water and sewer. We're not doing that. We're only doing levy.
Well, that's what we think right now. Sorry.
So so the levy project, as it came together, we were working with the Department of Natural Resources and going through some of the cost-benefit ratio. And as we worked through that process, we ended up actually buying 3 homes that had previously been protected by the levy, and took those out of behind the levy. We ended the levy short of where they were because they had a very similar situation with your creek that comes through the downtown area here. They had Kells Coulee, which came through the very south end of town. So what we did is we actually excluded the creek, which had a drainage area of about 2,600 acres and would have required an immense lift station to get that water over the top of the levee when the St. Croix River is flooded. So we actually wrapped the levee short to the north side of that, made that creek go outside. So that was one major change. And then we raised the county road up 3 feet to become the end of the levee. On the other end of town, To reduce the cost of the lift station, we had a bunch of water that came down the bluff down a county road. And with the reconstruction of the downtown roads and knowing that if we divert that water to the north of behind the levee, we can take that out from behind the levee too and reduce the size of the lift station that we need. In addition, we were able to provide water quality treatment to areas that previously had not received any treatment for stormwater runoff. That allowed us to capture other grant money in the process to help pay for that diversion and treat that water before it entered the St. Croix River, which has a TMDL for it.
Okay.
So there's a lot of different pots of money when you start looking at this that you can pull in and fix.
Yeah,
a lot
but
of different
surely
issues.
you must have looked at the project as, these are the roads we're building, this is the levee we're building. I guess my question is this, of all the funding you received, how much was directly for the levee itself?
Well, the levee itself was probably in that $8 million range because we had septic systems physically in that levee that had to come out. We had
Okay,
to
so
find
that was the
alternatives.
cost of it. What was the funding for it?
So we had a unique funding element of the DNR. Their grant is usually $50. We were able to work with our legislators to actually cap the local match at $2,094,000 for the local match. And they have given us almost $4 million. It'll probably be $4 million when we're done. So it was really 1/3, 2/3 instead of 50-50.
Okay.
And there's some strategies working with your
That
legislators.
was what I was curious, is what the
Yeah.
ratio was.
Well, and in addition to that, we also had some PSEG money from the stormwater, and also the PFA did contribute to pieces of that levee too with their grant money because of the sanitary issues. So we were able to leverage, and the county put in some money too. So I would say
Okay.
that the levee was more than 1/3, 2/3.
Okay,
So
thank you very much.
Do you know the length of our levee as compared to the length of their levee? Are they similar? Or
yours is much further. I think, I don't remember the numbers off the top of my head. I think we're about 1,400 feet in that levee, and I think yours is 2,200. I can't remember off the top of my head.
Okay.
Because right now that levee comes all the way up into the old village, the downtown area there. So,
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, I have bucket questions. So we're looking at the concept plan and funding strategy. This is the dating stage, and you're starting to look really good. Yeah, no, still you.
okay.
But you're starting to look really good because you have the confidence to do it. You're telling us that you can, and it's only $67,000 compared to $325,000. If we're looking at, we go through concept plan and funding strategy, and we look and we have 2,200 feet that work out well. You think you can do it. We start to look at funding sources. What's your role, and what do you think? Give me just a rough idea of what your fees are going to be for designing and permitting construction and levee certification.
Well, I think without knowing the limits of what the project will be once we develop that concept, it's kind of tough to do that.
What was your total fee for Afton?
That is a little different animal, I would say, than what you have to deal with. We also
I don't disagree with you, but we're also using it as a very obvious case study, and we quote it a lot. So I'm just wondering whether it's different or not. I'm just wondering what your fee was there on a $20 million project, 33.33%.
I think it'll be in that 15 to 18%.
Okay.
If I'm forced to throw a number out there.
Oh, that's fair. That's fair. And throughout that process, do you act as the construction management, the general, or do we do that on our own and you oversee it?
We typically take these from cradle to the end.
Okay.
So I hate to say grave
No, I
because
know, I'm
that's
with you.
not a good way to end any project. And that consistency we feel is important because we're always meeting with the regulatory entities through that whole process. So we know the commitments that were made during the process, how the interpretation of those funds and what their eligibility is. To lose that consistency through the process can sometimes compromise some of that funding. Somebody might not interpret it the same way that you initially did when you started into the process.
Well, and quite frankly, that's how I would want it. I don't want to switch dance partners every time something goes on. I want to know, and coming with, I mean, if 15 to 18% is borderline accurate, I think it's going to be a little higher than that. I've been through this before. I think even at 20%, engineering fees typically run that, which is fair. If it's from start to finish, and it's a $20 million project, you're talking about a $3 million fee, $4 million fee, which is a lot of money, but not if you actually get us what we were trying to get for the last 20 years. If the cost benefit analysis works. I mean, there's a lot of ifs here. I mean, and that's why, I mean, Cindy and I have been talking this, probably our 200th or 300th conversation, so.
Well, and Mr. Mayor, and I think that's why it's important to have that concept plan up front and that strategy of how you're going to actually get the financing in place and get the financing in place before the city of Carver extends a lot more money into the process. Let's get into the requests for the permitting and let's secure that funding. It doesn't make a lot of sense to move forward and spend a lot of local money when you don't have to.
Right. Or if it doesn't make sense.
Right.
Because I mean, I like the value that you're putting forth and the confidence that you're putting forth. $67,000 is still a lot of money when it comes to taxpayer money. But comparatively speaking, it's not. So it's a really good first date. And as we go through this, we find out what you're going to provide to us. And if it's a possibility, I'm going to guess if it's not a possibility, you don't want to move forward either.
That would be true.
So if we can't get the funding, we can't pay you. So, I mean, there's a lot of, so I appreciate that. Any other questions, comments?
Oh, I just wanted to comment. I actually had talked to the city of Afton about the process and how they have worked with your company. And this isn't a lot of technical information, but they have found the working relationship with you to be very, very positive. And they're really looking forward to certifying their levy. And then they're in the last bucket at this point, aren't they? So do you know how long to expect before they're going to hear back on that?
Well, I think the first part is we have to finish up the record plans and so forth. So they've just finished reconstructing the levee in the last couple of weeks.
Okay.
And so we're in the process of restoration, and we want to walk it with the Corps of Engineers first. Mm-hmm. We think it's really important because they do have a say in how FEMA reviews what you have. And so we'll get their comments first, and then we'll put the whole package together and ship it off.
Okay. Well, they had nice things to say about it.
Did you talk to a council member or a city administrator?
The city administrator, or whatever title he holds there. But yes, that's what it was. It wasn't a council member.
It'd be Ron Morris.
Okay. Anyone else? Comments, questions? Annette, how are you feeling?
I'm feeling good. I was at the work session last Monday, and I thought you mentioned a couple other cities that also worked. Was Champlin?
Yeah, Champlin and South St. Paul.
I have complete faith in that. No, but you're invested in it, and you have a downtown business. Yep. Courtney, you were going to say something?
Yeah, so I think something that you didn't go over tonight that you did in the work session 2 weeks ago, I'm just wondering if you can reiterate it, talking about how the length of that first bucket and how that's dependent on the legislature this year and their bonding cycle and budget cycle.
That's a very good question. We're not in a bonding cycle currently. That happens in the even-numbered years, and we're coming up on the 2019 legislative session. There are still some direct contributions that can be added, and maybe they'll do a partial bonding bill. They have done that on extreme situations, and we do. I will tell you there is some large discussions that need to be had about transportation funding in the state this session. And if that conversation goes well, there more than likely would be a bonding bill to address that. And then that opens up everything for some financing. So what we would like to do is at least get the message out to the legislators that you're currently shopping around for some money. We're putting the pieces together and putting that story together so that we can begin telling that story to legislators and putting a team together that can help put the city of Carver in a position to be funded. And I think you're in a very good position. You are a metro area community. Some of these funding sources need metro area partners to pass because a lot of this money goes to outstate areas, and you'll find partners with some of those outstate areas as well. Red River Valley, some of the areas in southeastern Minnesota as well. They've all received this type of funding, and they're always looking for metro partners to help continue the financing for these programs.
Great.
Go ahead. Sorry, I totally
No,
interrupted you.
I was going to switch topics, so if you're going to piggyback off of that.
On the topic of transportation, I think that 212 is going to get funded over the course of the next year or so. And how do you think that that's going to relate to funding for this particular area if 212 gets a mitt full of money and then right in their, literally their backyard now to get money for Levee? Do you think that's a hindrance or?
I think the two issues aren't really connected.
Okay.
The Transportation Committee doesn't usually talk too much
I
to
just
the
think of
Environmental
area.
Committee.
Okay, all right. Sorry, go ahead.
No, it's okay. The other thing that I was going to ask, and again, this is more just for the benefit of the folks who are watching at home or who might not be familiar with this issue. In addition to the flood infrastructure, can you talk through some of the other benefits of having a certified levee for the folks in our downtown?
Sure. I think the certified levy, one, removes the restriction of the purchase of flood insurance because it actually removes the floodplain from the downtown area. And then it also allows folks to invest more than 50% of the current property value. I think the other piece that you'll see is after the levee is constructed and almost even before it's usually certified, you'll start to see people start investing in their properties again. It's really tough right now as a property owner to want to go out and make a large investment when you know there are limitations to what you can get for value on sales. You'll see an increase in tax base. And those are some of the things I think that in the cost-benefit ratio we want to take into consideration is not just how much it costs to build a levee, but what is the increase in tax base that can happen when you're done. And your costs for damages and flooding, but if you don't flood anymore, then people can invest in your capital costs and your infrastructure costs can all be protected as well. So we can take advantage of those tax dollar increases and those property value increases.
Thank you.
We won't have to do levee watch when the river rises in the spring. All right. Any other comments, questions?
I will make a motion to accept the proposal from WSB to conduct a certified levy study for $67,000.
There's a motion by Councilmember Johnson,
I'll second it.
seconded by Councilmember Monroe. There's a motion and a second. Any further discussion? I just want to say thank you. You came and actually, I was an old 87-year-old fuddy-duddy. I didn't think there was any possibility that this could work. I'm hesitant, but you've given me hope, and I appreciate that. I hope it works out, and this is the first step to it. I'm going at this with kid gloves, but this is the most excitement I've had towards this in my 20 years. So that's either like a big build-up for you to fail or a really big build-up for you to succeed. And I really hope it's the latter. I really do, because if the cost-benefit analysis is there, I'm really into this. So I appreciate your efforts here. Any other comments, questions? There's a motion and a second. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Welcome aboard.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Now we own you. All right. We are now moving on to communications. Mr. Mareck.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. As you may notice during our work sessions, we usually end with city council requests. Since there isn't a work session, that city council request piece is if the council has any requests of staff for research or projects to investigate. So I just wanted to open that up to the council in lieu of not having a work session tonight if there's any specific requests.
I do.
Go ahead.
We've been talking a lot and looking at the 2019 street improvement project, and I've been hearing a lot of feedback from the residents who live in that area, and when it comes to the cost and what they're going to be dealing with assessments and things like that. I know that we have been working hard on that project and seeing what we can do for any possible cost savings. Whether we have found anything specific or not, I want to ask to do a review of the ordinance about let's see, which section is this here? The water supply and distribution system, I believe, is the correct one, and we're looking under the well section and services and when we have to shut it off in our connections. We have wells and septics that are up in that area, and I know that we're looking at having that available for irrigation yet in their yards. A question I have and that I'd like a little more information and possibly us to look into a little bit further is, if I'm reading the ordinance correctly, it gives them 90 days to connect. Is that, once that is completed, that the homeowner has 90 days to connect into the city water and sewer system?
I don't know the answer to that. Typically, on like full, like new connections, the city council has taken some liberty in providing either a year or two to make a connection to the system, but I defer to the city attorney if he's recalls any specific language related to that.
There is a mandatory hookup provision. I'm sorry, I don't know exactly what it is, but there is a finite period of time in which a property owner must connect once sewer and water are available. I can look, I just don't know right
Sure. What I'm seeing here is, and if, like I said, if this is the correct section, it says at such time as the public water line becomes available within 66 feet of the property, the water line shall be connected to within 90 days or after notice to do so. So, I have a little bit of thought about the fact that if it isn't broken, don't fix it, and possibly looking into the fact of we're redoing the road, which needs it. The drainage there and the road is falling apart, but they'll be stubbed in at that point. So you will at that point have all of the utilities that are stubbed there. I'd like to look at, if possibly it isn't broke, we don't have to fix it, that they can hook up when at such time that their septic needs to be replaced. If the well is in working order, I realize our ordinance now states that you have to connect because we've run it by your house, but I hear a lot of pushback from residents who want to keep using their well. They like their well water and they have their septic and they're not failing at this time, so they are feeling frustrated with the fact that they have to hook up to something when their system isn't failing. So if there's a way that we can look at how it can be written that they can keep that and not connect until such time as their system fails.
Who makes the determination if their system's failing?
Well, when your septic backs up into your house, you'll know that your system has failed you. And
Well, that's one way, but, I mean, it could be leaking into the system. Andrew, please, help a brother out.
The county does inspections on septic systems, and they are the ones that enforce whether they're in compliance or not.
Oh, okay. We have 90 days. This is what we've always done. I'm not for looking at anything different. Are you? For looking at something
I'm
other
looking
than
at
90?
something other than 90 days. I am. And we had just talked about, 1 to 2 years. I think, like I said, it's stubbed there. They have the access to it. The city at that point, then I don't believe once it's stubbed in has anything else to do. It's the private contractor that the homeowner hires at that point, correct?
Yeah, so once it's stubbed, there's probably two main pieces. One is the physical connection from the main line to the home, and then the second piece is kind of threefold. One, once it's connected, there's a fee owed to the Met Council for sewer connection, and then the city has its own local SAC and WAC fees. So those two pieces, the physical connection and the payment of fees, with any change would have to be somehow discussed, and we'd have to be given direction from the council. If the connection happened at some point in time, would they be charged a fee at the time that the stub was provided, or would they be charged a fee at the time they were connected?
Well, why would we put in water and sewer if we were going to let people just choose to put in and connect whenever they want? We're paying to put that in. We'd pay to put it in everybody's.
But it makes sense to put it in at that time as the road is being redone so that you don't.
Yeah, but what
rip it
pays
up
for the water
again.
and sewer? Go ahead, Cindy.
Okay, Carver only got city water and sewer in the 80s. And I can guarantee you that every home that was available to be hooked up to city water and sewer had to hook up. Because you have to support the system. And that's why we have this policy that once the water is and sewer system is within an X amount of feet of your home, you are required to hook up to help support the system. Plus, we've got to, I mean, it is a thing, we have to pay for it. So if they don't pay the hookup fees, we've got it stubbed there. It's, you know,
I just think the 90 days, I think that this is
think
an
90
expensive.
days is too
It's too short. So I think that we're doing all this project, but I think that we should maybe revisit. I think 90 days is a little bit short for some of that expensive.
that we've had
Chris,
in
just
the 90
because,
days?
excuse me one second, just because we've had it, this is the way we've always done it, doesn't mean we can't look at it another way.
I don't want to look at anybody that I've been a part of in the last 20 years making hookup. I don't want to look at any one of those people and look them in the eye and say, well, we're going to let these people go for a year or 2 years for political reasons. There's no possible way I want
This
to look
is
at
not
that.
political reasons. This is me trying to help out the residents who I'm hearing issues from, Mike.
Okay.
Courtney, I'm sorry.
No. So I was just going to say, so I participated in the walkthrough when we did that off of Kirchy and Dietrich back in May? And I think that the information that we shared with residents that night, and correct me that I'm wrong, that they would have a year to hook up. So everybody, based on the feedback from that night, the majority of folks seemed very comfortable with that, just based on the feedback from that night.
Sure.
Granted, that was 4 or 5 months ago now.
Sure.
But I
Who
think,
would have said a year if our policy is 90 days?
Yeah, who said that?
Andrew, let's blame it on Andrew.
I don't have the ordinance right in front of me. From just a simple logistics standpoint, the project will likely be done pending the council decides to move forward, will be done in October, November of next year. And so they physically wouldn't be able to even make the connection. So I think this is an assumption on my part that because these construction projects typically follow that timeline, the council has, or at least in past projects that I've worked on where water and sewer has gone in as a new service, they've been given a year. So if it does say 90 days, I'm guessing that hasn't been followed, or there's a different application. I can't speak to the context of it, but we can certainly have the city attorney look at it and write us a memo on it.
Can I say
Whatever
something?
yeah, please.
I think just from this conversation that maybe we should shore up what our policy is and, you know, kind of get it in stone or something. I mean, 90 days or a year or whatever, but I'm not in favor of people just indefinitely not hooking up until, you know, until their circumstances warrant them to. I mean, I think we have to have a policy and stick to it.
And as a secondary piece, if the council elects to do this, I'd like to ask the city attorney to explore what I'd call unintended consequences. I don't know what they are, but, you know, we do a lot with annexation and adding new sewer and water, and so I would want the city attorney to explore that. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that, Larry, that...
Well, I'm listening to this and it's percolating, and
Percolating.
probably when we're talking about on-site septics, that's a bad word, but the thoughts immediately running through my head is in terms of timing and when. The answer for water might be a little different than it is for sanitary. The city has some agreements in place with the Metropolitan Council. I mean, you remember the Met Council's paid over $10 million to build an interceptor into the city. I don't remember, I haven't looked at them in years, but obviously they didn't build an interceptor into the city with the thoughts that the city wouldn't require people to hook up. So I mean, I clearly want to look at that, and there may be a different standard in that than there is for water. I'd also have to look at the state. For on-site septics, they're regulated, as Andrew said, by the county. The only way a city can regulate on-site septics is if it has an ordinance more comprehensive than the county ordinance, and you don't, because you don't have that many. It defaults to the county does the inspections, when they transfer. So I'd want to look at the county ordinance. I want to look at I got to look at the MPCA rules and regs too, and see what it is. I mean, I think ultimately you have to require a hookup. I'm just not quite sure what the timeline is. You probably have a little more latitude on a water hookup than you do for a sewer. To a certain extent, that may be a distinction without a difference. because if somebody is going to stub in a sanitary line, it's pretty foolish not to stub in a water line from the street stub into their home at the same time, because otherwise at some point in time when the well goes, you've got to do it again. So the economics of the situation would provide some defense, but if I understand what the council's concerns are, there is a clear definition of what is the current existing timeline that an homeowner with an existing sanitary, or with an existing septic and water well must connect to each system, and is there some latitude to perhaps extend those timelines out to as long as a year? Am I hearing kind of what's what?
Yeah, and I'd also like to know what our actual policy is right now.
Do that.
Are we going to have it at a work session then, or?
We
do you wanna
can,
do?
we can bring it back and either to a regular meeting or a work session, whatever the council's preference is.
Work session, I mean, would be
Yeah.
fine with me.
Yeah, let's bring it to a work session.
Thank you.
All right, on to communications. Monroe.
Nothing.
Johnson.
Just a planning commission and a business council meeting this week.
Mock.
The Carver Lions are hosting Trunk or Treat down on 3rd Street, and that will be on Saturday, the 28th, from 1 to 4. So bring the kids down there, and we'll have a little Halloween get-together.
And if anybody wants to participate with a trunk full of treats, who do they contact?
You could go through the Carver Lions Facebook page, and we can get you in contact with the right people.
Yeah.
I'm really glad you said trunk. Sounded like trunk. Hank.
We had a Parks Commission meeting, and we went over the 2040 comp plan deeply, so it was all good.
A deep dive?
Deep dive.
Mareck.
Thank
I have
you.
one thing. Can I go first?
Just called on it.
I know. I don't know why I did that. I want to make sure that we say thank you to the Osterdigs. Greg and Lori are closing a cup of Carver with Greg's health. Lori's going to spend some more time with her family. And I personally want to say thank you for everything that you've done for this community. With Cup of Carver, obviously, other things that have been done and will continue to be done. But I want to make sure that we make a complete shout out to the Osterdig family. Please get well. If there's anything that is needed, please let us know. I've been in contact with them through the process, and I'm really, really glad that Lori's taken some time with Greg. I'm really upset. Upset is the wrong word. I'm really bummed out that Cup of Carver is closing, but I totally understand it, and I want to make sure that we all give a shout out to them. Follow that.
So in front of the council, there's a joint invite from the League of Minnesota Cities and Metro Cities. They're co-hosting a regional meeting on November 29th at Brookview in Golden Valley.
What's the date on it?
November 29th. So if you would let me know, we can register you to attend, and if we have more than
I'm in.
3, then we'll post it as a quorum. So I have Mayor Webb. If any of the remainder of the council would like to attend, if you want to let me know within the next week or two, we'll get you registered up. Thank you.
Aaron? Larry? Brenda? Andrew? Brian? I'd entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
It's a motion to adjourn.
Second.
And a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you all. Ryan, anything you want to add, bud?